My presentation is going to be both PowerPoint and it's going to be a sort of a show and tell. So instead of just looking at the screen, I'm going to have some other things to show you. Here is my dad. Hold on one second. Here is my dad. He's not Clark Gable, who flew B-17s, and he's not on the front cover of a magazine. But this is my wonderful dad right here. And if you notice, Clark Gable took his picture with gun shells around his neck. And anyway, but credit to Clark Gable because he did fly missions, and he did inspire a lot of men to go and join the Air Corps, the Air Force. And so anyway, but my dad was not on the front cover of a magazine. Anyway, funny story before we start, I just sort of to tell you a story. When I was growing up, and it was mid-60s, I was about 8 years old, I told my dad what I wanted for Christmas, Mom and Dad, by the way. I said, Dad, I want one of those Cox airplanes where you have the engine, you know what I'm talking about? You have a string and you would stand and you would go it around and you could get a P-51 and you could get all kinds of American airplanes, and it had, you know, it was big, it was like this big, it was fiberglass, it was a plastic. And that's what I wanted for Christmas. And he said, son, what kind of plane do you want? Because they have a whole bunch of them. I said, I want a German Stuka dive bomber. Now, that's a Stuka dive bomber, German plane, German markings, and that's what I asked for Christmas. And my dad didn't say one word. He didn't say, hey, I fought them for years. And so for Christmas that year, big giant box, I got a Stuka German dive bomber. And again, my dad didn't say one word about it. He didn't say, son, don't you think you better get a P-51 American plane? But anyway, that sort of tells you about my dad, that he did forget the war to some degree. And if you remember, my sister remembers, I think he ended up buying 3 Volkswagens. And this was in the 1960s. So anyway, he didn't hold any animosity. And anyway, with him you can see his wings right here. You see his wings. This was a big deal. And I've got his wings right here that are in the picture. And these are not just normal wings, these are navigator wings. And on the very top, it's like all kinds of, it's very different from other wings. But anyway, these are the wings in the picture right here. And of course, he was a second lieutenant when he started, and then he became a first lieutenant. He was promoted. So I'll tell you more about that later. Anyway, next. Here's my agenda. Introduction, background, enlistment and training, deploy to England, 35 missions, post-missions, life after war, discovery, and summary. And that's sort of what I'm going to go through in categories. If you've got any questions, probably wait until the end if you don't mind, because I've got so much I wanted to cover, and of course I can't because I just don't have the time. But anyway, but there's so much. Next. Background. Early life. He was born in 1924 in a little town, it's not even on the maps, on most maps, called Wirtz, Virginia. Anybody ever heard of Wirtz, Virginia? Good. I think, but anyway, grew up on a farm and had to drive down a dirt road off the main road about 5 miles or so. Dirt gravel road all the way down to the Holla. Beautiful farm, dairy farm. But of course it was the Depression. It was growing up in the Great Depression. And so anyway, they were land rich, as they say, and cash poor. But Wirtz, Virginia, Wirtz is close to Rocky Mount, Virginia, and then Rocky Mount is close to Roanoke, just to let you know. So he was a country boy. He was a simple country boy. And talking about the Air Force, he probably never jumped more than from the hayloft down to the ground. I mean, he just wasn't around planes. He went to the University of Richmond for 1.5 years. And if you remember Bill Montgomery, who was fought in Iwo Jima, that was here before he passed, also I found out later went to the University of Richmond too. Draft registration. He registered for the draft on June 30th, 1942. And I looked up his papers, and it was so incredibly funny. I was telling my sister last night, on his papers that he had to fill out, this was on fold 3, they asked for a phone. So when he registered, you have to put a phone down. Of course, he put no phone. And I was telling them, I said, well, gee, what about his email address or cell phone? He must have had a cell phone or an email address. And then it hit me. I said, this is 1943 or 1942. So instead of being drafted, he knew he was going to be drafted. So what he did, he went ahead and enlisted and chose the Army Air Corps, of course. And I'm so glad he did. Hilbert, I'm sorry, because he would have been in the infantry probably with you. But anyway, my dad went to Miami Beach. That's where he went in. And my dad was 5'6", 135 pounds, which I don't know if you've been, some of you have been on a B-17. How many have actually been on a B-17 in here? Well, quite a few. You know how small you have to be, so 5'6", 135 pounds is perfect. And so he really fit that well. Let's see, pre-flight school. He went on to pre-flight school at Maxwell Air Force Base, Montgomery, Alabama. Went for 10 weeks. 10 weeks. Next. Gunnery school. Now you notice he kind of looks older because he's got a pipe. And of course, heavy jacket. This is at Tyndall Field Gunnery School, graduated in December 1943. And he went there for 6 weeks. So already he's had 16 weeks in the middle of World War II. 16 weeks of training. Next, navigation training. This is my dad here. And of course, these are some of his buddies. These aren't really his crew, but it's some of his buddies at the navigation school. That was at Selman Field, Louisiana. And the reason I'm telling you these things in these places is because here, America was in the middle of World War II, and they're training these men for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. A lot of people think, oh, well, when you enlisted, you went right on to war within about 30 days. But in total, there was 36 weeks of training in the middle of World War II. 36 weeks, think about that. And of course, some of these planes went up and they were killed the first mission. And you think about all that training that they had. I'm going to show you something that you probably didn't know. This was around our house for many, many years. When he graduated from navigation school, they got an annual, like you would get in high school. Now again, this is in the middle of World War II, an annual. His picture is in here, just like a high school annual. This is for navigation school again. But what I did, I started looking through this, and some of his guys that went through school with him, you know, of course, they signed it like you would do a high school annual. You know how a high school annual, you go, good luck at Exxon, or good luck with your new job, that kind of thing. These all said, good luck, hope you survive. I mean, completely different notes from, you know, we'll see you next week, or we'll see you next month on college campus. But almost every handwritten note in here says, hope you make it. And so that's how things were. But what I really wanted to make sure you were aware of is in the middle of war, they're putting out an annual, which was, you know, wonderful for the families too. You remember there was all these families back home. So anyway, it's called 00 Selman Field, as you can see that. So anyway, and these are, by the way, star charts. These are star charts. They had to learn charts, compasses, all kinds of different things that they had to do. So now, let's see. He finished navigation school. Next. This is a little bit blurry, but of course it's still about 80. All these photos are about 80 years old. This is my dad on the left. This is my youngest uncle. He had to stay on the farm. And this is my grandmother. And you notice he's got a tie on. This is my Uncle Walter, or William, I'm sorry. This is Uncle Walter. He was in the Navy going to the Pacific. This is my grandmother, of course. And look at the difference in the uniforms here. I mean, two different branches of service, of course, but look at the difference in the uniforms. And anyway, one of the things I never knew about, never asked my dad about, is how in the world, and of course they were getting ready to deploy. They were probably on the way to the train station. They were on leave before they went overseas. But I can only imagine my grandmother, her thoughts of this may be the last time we ever see either one of them, maybe both of them, and my grandfather as well. But you think that final goodbye, they weren't going to see any of these boys, or either boy, for at least 2 years, maybe even longer. But you think about that goodbye and how that must have been at the train station. I had to be very emotional. But this is on the farm, you can see. So they had to get them to the train station and then head on, Dad going to Europe and my Uncle William going to Asia. And of course neither one of them really knew exactly where they were going. So anyway, next. Deployment to England. This is a handbook. I had not seen this before. Instructions for American servicemen in Britain, 1942. Anybody ever seen this? John, you've probably seen a copy or two of some originals. Yeah. I'm going to read you something. Here's the introduction. You are going to Great Britain as part of an Allied offensive to meet Hitler and beat him on his own ground. For the time being, you will be Britain's guest. The purpose of this guide is to start getting you acquainted with the British, their country, and their ways. America and Britain are allies. Hitler knows they are both powerful countries, tough and resourceful. He knows that they, with the other United Nations, mean his crushing defeat in the end. So it's only common sense to understand that the first and major duty Hitler has given his propaganda chiefs is to separate Britain and America and to spread distrust between them. If he can do that, his chance of winning might return. Also in this book is about not talking about the Revolutionary War. I thought that was really, really good. Watching the women, being proper and all that. So anyway, this little book, I'm sure, got used quite a bit. And but this was instructions on. I can't imagine going to a country and you get a book on instructions. How to act is really what it was. Now, the deployment to England. Scott, will you hold that up, please? This is his bag. Now, if you're going 2 years overseas or anywhere, you're going to 2 years. Your whole life has got to be in this little bag. I mean, can you imagine that? My wife and I are supposed to go to Europe before long, and we're taking, twice as much as this, probably. But anyway, his name is on it, and Lieutenant Charles F. Kingery. But anyway, the other thing I was going to tell you, the way I came to this bag is my cousin. They were selling the home place up in Virginia, down in on the farm. And she either called me or emailed, I can't remember, and she said, "We found a bag and it's got your dad's name on it. I don't have any idea what it is." And I said, "What color is it?" and all that. And she said, "Well, it's green and it's got zippers." And I said, "Oh, it's got to be my dad's service bag." And of course, it had lieutenant on it. So I said, I want that bag. Now, this bag has been sitting in a basement up in Virginia for almost 80 years. And look at it. I can take it. I may take it to Europe. But anyway, to me, it's a real testament of 2 years. And this is what you are given to take your stuff in. And the other thing, it's got Army Air Forces on it right here. And if you'll show the other side, I think it's all the same on the other side. But it's a wonderful bag and it lasts forever. And so that's just, it got tons of zippers, as you see. But it survived. And after all these years in the humidity and a wet basement. Thank you, Scott. Now, deployment, here's where he was based. Okay, there was tons of bases over in England, of course, as you probably know. And this is Sneederton Heath. London is here. Cambridge is here. And then Dad's base is right here. I don't know if y'all can see that or not, but it's right here. And of course, it was close fairly close to Germany, or closer than being way down here. And that's, of course, why so many of the bases were over on the far eastern side. But as you can see, all of these are different bases, different areas. I don't have the time to go through some of the other bases around him, but Cambridge, and I'll talk about Cambridge later, and then London. And of course, when they got some days off, they'd go into Cambridge and London and certainly get away. But the coast isn't that far, so when they took off, they're usually heading pretty much east. And of course, he was in the 96 Bomber Squadron, heavy bombers group, in the 413 Squadron. And so, next. This is my dad's pay stub. And I'm only showing you this stuff because my dad risked his life, 35 different missions, and here's what he got paid for doing that. Now, most of us today, if you were going to risk your life, you'd be going, I want thousands of dollars. Anyway, his pay was $183.33 a month, and that was for monthly base pay and longevity. And then his additional pay for flight pay was $91.67. And then his subsistence pay was $21, so the total was $296. And anyway, I think, like I say, I think this is important because it shows what, and that was a fair amount of money back then, because remember, you were coming out of the Depression. But anyway, this is something that they did. Here's a picture, and unfortunately it didn't come out quite as well. This is my dad, and this is the bombardier, and this bombardier's name was Zapsky with a C, and the painted nose is Pussycat right here. But anyway, it's got a painted nose. It's a beautiful plane. I haven't been able to really look at much about it. Now I'm going to show you a picture of my dad on the base. And this is my dad here, okay? And this is early in the war. They're on the base, and this is the base in the background. And this is his bombardier. This is his pilot, Jack Reed. But does anybody notice anything odd about this picture? It's an 80-year-old picture. Anybody notice anything odd, different? If you can make it out.
There's an animal.
Yes.
This is a donkey. They are holding a donkey. My dad's got his hand underneath his nose. Now this donkey is called Lady Mo. Lady Mo is one of the most famous. John, wouldn't you say Lady Mo is one of the most famous?
Donkeys in the 80s.
Yeah, Lady Mo. And you see the head, and they're each holding the ears. And the reason I'm showing you this, for several reasons, you had to have something to break the stress and it sort of be fun, something you could laugh at. When I saw this picture, and Donna, you probably saw it for 40 years, I never noticed anything. And I said, but one day I said, what the heck are they holding here? An animal. I said, why would they be holding a donkey? Anyway, but this animal right here, and there's the feet, if you see the legs right here, went on, if you type in Lady Mo in the computer, you will probably get 100 different things come up. There's a book written about this animal. They had a baseball park named Lady Mo Park. They had a movie theater named after Lady Mo. I mean, and then this guy wrote a book. I really need to get the book about it because it's a fascinating story. And but anyway, it said that Lady Mo loved tobacco, toilet rolls, and donuts. But here's what my dad said about the donkey. This is his own words in his scrapbook. The donkey was brought from North Africa in the Bombay to our base in England. They called the donkey also the Queen of Heath. That's, of course, the base. And anyway, but one thing else I want you to notice, you notice their faces. This is early in the war. And if you notice their faces, I wouldn't say they're happy, but they're laughing, they're smiling, they're kind of joking. I'm going to show you some pictures here in a minute or two, and their faces are going to look a lot different from men, sort of from boys to men. But anyway, this is one of my favorite pictures. Very iconic to me, just very iconic. This is his jacket. You'll see his jacket in a few minutes. And other than that, it's just you can see a little bit of the base hangar back here in the barracks and all that. So anyway, but that's Lady Mo. Oh, and the way they got her, they put her in the bomb bay and brought her over to England. And that was after, they said, severe negotiation with the North Africans. So anyway, 35 missions. Let me show you the 35 missions. Take that. Put that just right there. This is his list of missions. I don't know if you can see that or not. Scott, do you want to hold it up maybe and hold it maybe right here where others can see it? That's all right. You just put that down. Yeah. But just a little bit where they can see it a little bit better. I couldn't enlarge this much more. I don't know. Can you see for the glare? It's a little bit dark. This is his entire list of missions here. Starting on August 24th, 1944, Brux, and then Brest, France. Brest, France, I don't have that time to tell you about each mission, but at least I can tell you a little bit about a few of them. His second mission was Brest, France, and that's where the U-boat submarines pens were held, and so they bombed those from the air to try to stop the U-boats, the German submarines. And then there was a three-leg here where they ended up going to Eastern Europe, Eastern Germany, bombing Eastern Germany, and then had to go to Russia, stop in Russia and refuel, and then come back all the way around France and all the way back up to England, of course. And we've got, in a lot of these cities you recognize, Bremen, Nuremberg, Mainz, Stuttgart. These were all horrible cities with tons of guns that were always firing at them. Also, Lutzkendorf, which was the 15th mission. My dad's co-pilot got killed by flak coming down through the cockpit. He was a co-pilot sitting on the right-hand side. He got killed instantly on the 15th mission. So, and Lutzkendorf was a very industrial area. Can they see that all right? Come back around here if you would. Okay, sorry, this isn't a little bit brighter and all, but I want to call it Merseburg. Merseburg was 2nd of November 44. Everything I've done, I've been to several talks about where were the worst cities to bomb and all, and Merseburg is, I think, probably the worst. My dad bombed it 3 times in 1 month. Not once, but 3 times in 1 month. They had over 2,000 guns in that city protecting. It was oil city, and of course the Germans were running out of oil, so they did everything they could to protect Merseburg. But 3 times they went in that 1 month. And I told one guy recently who has done a lot of research, he'd never seen that before, that they would go that many times. But can you imagine flying to somewhere and you've got 2,000 guns aimed at you? Not 20, but 2,000. And so anyway, and they bombed always during the daylight, of course. A couple other things, Darmstadt, some of these cities you've probably been to, Hanover, Koblenz. A radio operator was wounded at this Merseburg one here, but he survived. Fulda, Cologne, you've heard of Cologne, of course. They bombed that. Augsburg. The last mission, his last mission was 35th mission on January 17th, 1945. Can you imagine flying your last mission? Can you imagine after 34 missions, you're going to fly your 35th mission? Do you think he slept at night? I mean, I just can't imagine, but I found out later that he barely made it on the 35th mission. They thought for sure they were going to have to dive into the channel, and in January they'd all be dead. There's no way to survive. But I did find out that he did survive, and if you look at these missions, 35, and of course they used to be 25 you had to fly, and then as the war went on they changed it to 30, and then when my dad got in there it was changed to 35. So I mean, my dad must have been going, oops, wrong time, they added 5 more. Anyway, but here's just a small list of things they had to survive. They had to survive mechanical problems, flak from German guns, German fighters that flew almost 200 miles faster than a B-17. B-17 was slow. I mean, not for that time, but just much slower compared to the fighters. They had temperatures of minus 60 below. That's not 6, but minus 60. They had to wear heated suits. I won't go into all the technical parts, but at least to give you an idea of how do you survive 35 missions? How do you survive it? How do you be a navigator with pencils and compass and watch if the temperature is minus 60? Think about that. There's no heater. There's no heater in the planes, really. There was a little bit. Frostbite, being shot down, having to parachute out, being captured, mental and emotional problems. That did happen back then. Mental and emotional problems where they just couldn't take it when they got to 20 missions or 25 or what have you. Unpressurized planes. You couldn't call somebody and say, "Hey, I want a drink" or something either. I mean, it's just hard to imagine. Collisions, many collided with each other. I mean, that's just going to happen. Sometimes they would have over 1,000 planes fly on one mission. That's 1,000 planes. Can you imagine looking out here and seeing 1,000 planes? Bombs misdropped on top of each other. That happened a lot. Just getting wounded. But so my dad, survived that. As far as this is, and of course, talking about the last mission, I can only imagine how each night before you went to bed and you knew you were getting up the next day, and you may not come back to your pictures of your family. You may not come back to anything. And I know through other people I've talked to, a lot of times they would come back from a mission and the guys bunked beside them, they had come in with a box and taken it away because he was gone, from some other plane. And each time a plane went down, that was 10 men, by the way. 10 men that went down. So anyway, thank you, Scott. Next, please. This is just as a refresher. This is a B-17. My dad would have sat right here. This is the bombardier. I'm going to give you another diagram, but he would have sat right here and been able to look out.
Turn around a little bit.
Yep. Oh, let me get out of the way. And my dad's designation here was a square C for his bomber group. This is a triangle A. So that's how they told and could see other planes and figure out what group they were with. And then they would have this designation sometimes on the wing as well. But my dad, this wasn't one of my dad's planes. But anyway, that gives you at least a look. And next, please. Did somebody?
Where's your dad sitting?
He'll show you.
Yeah, I'm going to actually show you. This is a complete diagram, cutaway, whatever you want to call it. Here's my dad had a desk job, right, Chuck? Isn't that what you said? He always wanted a desk job. There's an actual desk here for the navigator. And so my dad sat at a desk on a plane.
I'll go to the next slide.
Doesn't make it any easier. Here it is right here. It's a little bit blurry here. Pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, flight engineer, that's right, I can't see it so well. And then we go back, and here's the ball turret gunner. This organization, I know we had some ball turret gunners in it at one time. Tail gunner, waist gunners right here. All the officers were here, pretty much. Radio operator, they were all officers there. So anyway, when we were down in fact, Scott and I were down in Savannah, and we went on a special tour on the B-17 at the Mighty Eighth Museum, and it was incredible how challenging it was to go from the tail to the pilot. It was almost impossible to do, but you had to navigate and go all kinds of places. But and you got to imagine being on a plane like this for 10 and 12 hours, 10 and 12 hours, even longer, some of them. But anyway, but that's your diagram to show. And of course, Dad again was here looking out the window, or at least he had a window that he could look out, and then he could look forward. That was the nose cone. And then also, if you'll go back one, Chuck, please. He had to man a gun when he wasn't navigating. So he had little small, well, I shouldn't say small guns, but little areas where you had guns on both sides. There's a gun there. And so when he wasn't navigating and they were in combat, he had to run a gun as well. So a lot of people, I think, don't realize that. Okay, we got the diagrams. Let me show you something at his desk right here. This is his watch. Okay, this went on all 35 missions right here. This is his watch, not a normal watch. It's got 1 through 24 on there. And when my sister and I were cleaning out my dad's house, I distinctly remember being there, and for this different occasion, we were cleaning out his room, and she says, "Oh shoot, this watch doesn't work. I think I'm just going to throw it away," which is normal. And I said, "Well, wait a minute." And she was like going to the can with it, because when your parent dies, you have to go ahead and really get rid of things. So I grabbed her arm, I think, from what I remember, and I said, "That watch is something special." I said, "Or at least I want to see what it is." And sure enough, this was the watch he carried on his missions, and it's made by West Clocks, and it's just an incredible watch. It's not working right now. I think I'll get it working, but it's spotless, just spotless, but it's a very odd looking watch, made again by West Clocks. Next. Okay, these are his bombing runs and navigation charts. This is what he would put together, showing where the plane's going, where the target is, what to avoid. Now you don't really realize this. This is the other thing that they had to avoid. You're crossing battle lines here, probably where Hilbert was with his infantry. So you have to cross the American or British battle lines safely, and then no man's land in here, and then cross the German lines, because most of the time you're going behind the lines to bomb. And so anyway, I don't know all the different things here, but there's certain circles that mean stay away from those. There's also emergency places where you can land in case you have a problem. You had to have emergency landing locations. But then as you realize, here's the target with the circle, TGT. You had to hit the target and then come back around and go back the easiest, best way you could. And you think about how difficult that is back then. You didn't have a computer. You didn't have a phone you could look up. You had to map it out. I don't know if you remember, but in the 1960s, if you wanted to go somewhere, you'd call AAA and say, "Send me a map with and they would draw lines showing you where to go." Well, this is a lot of the same thing, but this took an incredible amount of training and work. Just this little map right here. And the target name is cut out for intelligence. It was cut out. And so all the ones he has are pretty much cut out, where they don't show what it is. But anyway, on this one, the target was Strasbourg, and they were going Koblenz, Frankfurt, Mannheim, Metz, but the target was Strasbourg. So anyway, next. And here's another one showing how you had to map it out. Just all kinds of things are on this map. And you see the target name again has been cut out for intelligence. And my dad, I'll tell you later, worked in an office, so he was able to get some of these and bring them home. But anyway, this gives you how technical a navigator had, why he had to go to school for 20 weeks is one of the reasons. And you got to remember, you got 10 men on your plane. If you mess up, you could risk 10 people dying, and also other planes that might be flying with you. So anyway, these are really interesting. Okay, and next.
Terry,
Okay.
weren't those, did we figure out those dark spots were the flak concentrations?
Yes, and places to avoid. Places to go. If you notice, they're going around, not over them, but around them. Here's one that they had to go through, but they're trying to get around those. Those are concentrations of some type, and it could be, depending on where it was, they could be civilians, it could be a variety of different things that they didn't want to hit or wanted to stay away from, as well as the guns that were there as well. Okay, here is another I've got about 30 of these, and these are incredible from the air. If you've never seen these from the air, these are fascinating. This is, before I get to those, that's a B-17 that's run into a fuel truck at their base. Now if you notice, this is a fuel truck laying on its side right here. That's a plane that apparently had a problem of some type, ended up hitting the fuel truck. You remember the last time you hit a fuel truck? What kind of danger that would be? But anyway, you see the extinguisher stuff that they put on here. Here's a one that had no gear, landing gear. This is a river. I haven't done the research on this. This is the lead bomber putting these out to show where the bombs or should be hitting. And this is ice. I think it's a river. I haven't done, again, the research on this. But it's you can see it from the air, what it looks like. The only way you could tell if a strike was good or not by these kind of pictures. There's no other way to tell that, you know, and some of the planes would have a camera in them. Here's another one. This is the Royal Hungarian Iron Works. And you see they've got a square there. And so, and actually, yeah, it's right there. But this gives you, again, some of the information here showing you what it looked like from, you know, 10,000, 20,000 feet, and how difficult it had to be to put a bomb right here, you know, or at least right in that area. Next. Now, this is maybe the part of the program that's a little bit tough, but this is the U.S. Army Cambridge American Military Cemetery. Who's been there before? I think a few of you, yeah, quite a few of you have been here before. This is the entrance, and I'm going to show you a little bit about that. Next. Okay, this is my dad. My dad is fifth from the left, right here. He's right there. He's one of the shortest ones. If you remember, I talked about his navigator. His co-pilot got killed on the 15th mission. Well, this is that service. You've got a flag at half staff. You've got a bugler. You've got 14 coffins with American flag. This is what Memorial Day is really about right here. This is really about what our parents and relatives and cousins and uncles and all, when they go to war. But this is, of course, their group, and they're at the funeral. You can see it's overcast. I think it was October. But one of these is his co-pilot. And, you know, it's just one of those things that is part of war. Part of war. Next, Chuck, please. This is my dad's crew. And one of the reasons I wanted to show you this, Scott, if you'll show this one first. If you'll hold this one first. Here's my dad here. This is the chaplain. And that's why he's got a check. Here's the pilot. Here's the bombardier. You saw them earlier. These are some of the gunners, but these are all the men on his crew. And the reason I'm trying to show you this was before that. This was early in the war. And you look at their faces, then you look at them here. You look at them here. Not that they were going to be happy or smiling or anything like that, but they've gone from boys, in my opinion, to here, men. In my opinion, they look many years older. I mean, you think about it, if you're at work and you lose one of your employees, how difficult that has to be. But, you know, the pilot looks completely different. Of course, he was sitting beside the co-pilot when he died. And of course, the co-pilot died by flak immediately. But, I mean, they're lucky to be alive, number one. So, but I like this picture because it really tells a story. But this is of course, at the funeral, and I don't think you see too many pictures like that. But again, take a look at this as compared to this. Thank you, Scott. And what I wanted to next show you, Scott, can you just be careful with it? Careful with it. Okay. His co-pilot, I did a little research on his co-pilot, and I think this is important because a lot of times we forget about people. This was his co-pilot, Lieutenant Stanley Haim, H-A-I-M. This is the one that died on the 15th mission. I did a little research because I couldn't find anything on him. And finally I punched in his rank. I had not punched in his rank. And up pops all kinds of things. Now he died almost 80 years ago. 80 years ago. And I can find information on him. But let me tell you about him. He was killed by flak, of course, on the 15th mission. His birthday, he was killed on October 7th. His birthday would have been, show it to you. His birthday would have been October the 17th. So he died 10 days before his birthday. The other thing, and this is real important, he had a brother fighting in Italy that was a lieutenant. He died 10 days later. So his mother and father got a telegram. Within 2 weeks, lost 2 sons. Not one, but 2. And this was interesting, they were Jewish. So they were fighting Hitler. So anyway, it was one of the most tragic things that I think I've read about recently. But anyway, and I could just imagine that probably in his barracks, his mother and father had probably sent him a care package, maybe even a cake. So probably when they got back after this mission on October the 7th, he probably had a package coming to him for his birthday. But then for his mother and father to find out 10 days later that his brother died. I mean, we sit here and we think, it's not even comprehensible to me. And then, of course, some families lost 3 and 4. I mean, as sad as that is. And he was killed, of course, his brother was killed in action in Italy. And anyway, okay, I believe next. This is another picture, and it's of the same funeral, of course. Dad, again, is right here. Flag, staff, bugler. Here's where they're doing the program right here, the service right here. And so I'm sure most of those men are probably still buried there in the Cambridge Cemetery. So when I get over there, I want to go see these guys. Next. Next. Okay. This is just something that we wanted to put in. The only way to survive after you're being hit and your plane's going down is by parachutes. Different types of parachutes. There's a front parachute, a back parachute, a back type parachute, and you see the jacket they've got on. But this is the only thing that kept you alive if you got hit and were going down. And you had to quickly put one of these things on and jump out of the plane, and that's when the plane is going like this. So you can just imagine how hard that was. And that's another reason I wanted to show you that was survival. This is the only way you survive from being that high up and you get hit by either a fighter plane or flak. Next. This is, I just wanted to show you this, another survival thing. This is the B-17 Flying Fortress bomber box. This is how they flew one on top of each other in bomber boxes. You see how these are? Now think about if somebody took their eyes off the air there and just kind of swerved over. And this could be 1,000 planes flying at one time. 1,000 planes. But look how close they are. I mean, it almost looks like the Blue Angels a little bit because they're so close. And so you can just imagine how many problems that you might have from people hitting each other or swerving. And if you were being attacked by fighter planes, you could not swerve away. You could not move away. You could not try to avoid. You couldn't. You had to go straight to the target. So this, anyway, this is one of Chuck's slides, and it just gives you that how dangerous just flying like that. Not even counting the other things. How dangerous, and how do you survive doing this 35 times? Next. after completion, his dad finished his 35th mission. Again, he didn't talk much about it, of course, but he told me he worked in the intelligence office, and that's how he got a lot of the different maps and things that he got from the intelligence, was able to bring them home from the intelligence office. One of the other things he did was he stayed in and shuttled troops to Casablanca. And the reason he would shuttle troops to Casablanca is that they could leave Casablanca and fly straight to the U.S. Whereas I believe from England you had to maybe, I don't know all the reasons for that, but you had to make a stop. I guess it was based on the gas as well. But anyway, but they would shuttle men back to America. Now this is his navigation ring. And this is a beautiful, beautiful, by the way, almost everything I've shown you is silver because they had plenty of silver. They just didn't have other metals. This is silver ring, and you notice the stone, this was a red stone, and you can tell that he used this on all his flights because it's worn completely down. So he must have used it on all his flights. It says U.S. Army Air Forces, Selman Field, navigator on the side here. This is the American Eagle on this side. And another reason I'm showing you this is in the middle of a war, after training, after graduation, you got a ring. I just thought that that was just incredible, that the government and the American people and the taxpayers, whatever, appreciated these men fighting and gave them a ring, and they wore that ring, and when they got captured they lost their rings and everything else. But anyway, but this is a great inscribed ring. That's their logo, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful ring. Next, this is his wings. I showed you his original wing here a minute ago. This is the Navigator logo here. This is the American logo here. But you think about something you've heard, oh man, you got to get your wings, you got to get your wings. I can't imagine how proud he was to have his wings and to wear them out anywhere. But and these are sterling silver as well. So like I said, silver was very available. Next. This is air metal. This is a very, very popular metal that so many of the crewmen got, but it's one of the most beautiful medals, I think. He got others, but I don't have those, and we don't have time to show the other ones. And he did get promoted, by the way, from second lieutenant to first lieutenant, which is a pretty big deal. You get more pay, you get more authority. So he did get, so he did some things right. And this is awarded for single acts of heroism or achievement while participating in aerial flight. Next. After the war, I'll tell you who that is. He went back to college, or he was only at the University of Richmond for a year and a half. And this is what he told us, that the government wanted men to come back and be doctors and pharmacists so much that they pushed them into med school. My dad wanted to go to pharmacy school, of course, but they didn't have to finish 4 years of college like you do today. So anyway, so they pushed him through. He graduated in pharmacy school after the war. And then probably it must have been about 15 years ago, the University of Richmond comes to my dad and others that were at the same time and gave him an honorary degree. They gave him an honorary degree because he was not able to finish regular college there because of the war. And so anyway, and I think you have that, Donna, framed. And so anyway, but I thought that, and that was on the front page of the USA Today, that they gave him and other men an honorary degree for serving the country, for spending, you think about prime years of their life, they were spent in training or fighting or on a plane or what have you, and so they gave him an honorary degree, and we have that today. This is my mom and dad. This is my mother here, and she died earlier before my dad. This is my dad. They're both getting off a plane, TWA plane. They're going to Europe on a convention. And if you notice something different, this just kind of jumped out at me. My mom's got a dress on, and my dad's got a coat and tie on. When's the last time you've seen that? When's the last time you wore a coat and tie on an airplane to Europe? which is, 10 hours or whatever. But anyway, what I'm trying to tell you is that they did go back to Europe, and they did spend time, many trips back and forth to Europe, and enjoyed it. And my dad never talked about Europe or anything about the war much, but every December 24th, he would talk about going up on December 24th, Battle of the Bulge, 1944, when the fog lifted and they were able to go up in their planes and bomb the Germans, which really helped win that battle. But he would always look up at the sky and go, gee, I was flying Christmas Eve. And it was actually during the day, I'm sure, but he would say, I was flying Christmas Eve, bombing the Germans and helping to win the Battle of the Bulge. And so anyway, that's sort of what he talked about, and he just didn't talk about it very much, which I completely understand. Ended up with a very successful drugstore, and he had, I don't know, he probably had 20 employees. And I think he treated them like a bomber crew. And when I say that, because they were a team, and these employees, for the most of the employees there probably worked 20, 30, and even 40 years with my dad in a retail drugstore. So I think what he learned in the military, flying a plane, and you're about to possibly die in the next second, I believe, the more I think about things, he was able to put together a crew at his drugstore and keep them there for 20, 30, and 40 years. And these were educated people. These were not just, teenagers and all. But anyway, he had a very successful drugstore business. Next, and I'm getting close. This is a bomber box. This is just another slide that we entered, and that's showing you again how close these fighters were. The bombers were, and how close they had to fly together, and they couldn't divert. So again, you had to survive this going back home, back to London or back to England from your bombing run, as well as going over. But this just gives you a little bit of that information. Next. Summary. This is actually my summary in discovery, sort of is what we call it. People ask me all the time, why do you have such an interest in this? Well, there were some great series out, Band of Brothers, The Pacific, old 12 o'clock reruns, 12 o'clock movie, 12 o'clock high movie. This organization, we actually had Dutch Van Kirk here. He was navigator, and you remember that, navigator of the Enola Gay that dropped the atomic bomb. So he talked, and that really got me thinking about my dad. He was a navigator both on B-17s and B-29s. And so anyway, but also when we were cleaning out my dad's house, we found a letter from one of my dad's crewmen, sort of a Christmas letter, something like that. It's been about 14 years ago. And it had an address on it, and it was my dad's tail gunner. I said, so I'm going to call him and see if he's still alive. Well, he answered the phone when I called him, Arkansas. The first thing he said, I'm the last one left. I'm the last crewman left. His name was Ralph Holmes. He was, again, the tail gunner. He would be all the way in the very, very, very back as a tail gunner. He told me, he said, we talked for a while, and of course I had shivers come up my spine when I realized that he fought with my dad on an airplane for 35 missions. And I wanted to try to get out and see him. He was in Arkansas, but then he passed not long after that. But on that phone call, it was so interesting because he said, I wrote a book. I wrote a book about all the missions, all 35 missions. I wrote a book. And of course, it wasn't a big professional book. It was really mostly for family, friends. He said, I'm going to send you a copy. So he sent me a copy outlining each and every mission. This is something my dad never talked about. He never talked about any of his missions. But this guy, and by the way, a tail gunner is the worst position on a B-17. You're most likely to get killed more than any other place. But anyway, he wrote a book and sent it to me, so I have that. So I'm hoping that I can put something together a little more technical, talking about each city, about what happened, who did this, who did that. But one thing he said about my dad, he was very complimentary. He said, my dad always took time with the enlisted men. He didn't say, I'm an officer and I'm going to be over here. But he said, my dad always spent time with enlisted guys instead of, back in those days, and I guess still someday, the officers are here and the enlisted men are here. And so anyway, last thing that I have is I want to show you this. This is probably the most important thing that I have, that we have from my dad's collection. There we go. Just show the front. This is his A2 bomber jacket, and this hung in our closet, my brother and I's closet, for 30 years. We just didn't pay much attention to it. Didn't think much about what it was. But this is, instead of a patch, this has been painted on. This is the 96 bomb group. Beautiful, beautiful painting here. This is the 413 Squadron. It looks like Halloween, doesn't it? A cat on a bomb. But that's his squadron right there, 413th. And if you go in the men's bathroom, you'll see these logos there. And but these are painted on. And normally you'd have your name here. He didn't have his name there. He had it in the back here. Lieutenant Barr is here. And then the most impressive thing, if you turn it over, this is a wonderful, wonderful painting. Let them see it over here, called Old Faithful. And that was just one of the planes that he had flown. I'm sure it wasn't the same plane every time. But if you see this, if you see the bombs for every mission were painted on here. So every mission you'd paint another bomb, another bomb, another bomb, another bomb. And as I looked at it so many times, I said, well, gee, there's only 25 bombs on here. And they must have stopped after 25 and just said, the heck with it. But anyway, so I got out my magnifying glass and looked a little closer. And if you notice, underneath the plane are 10 more, right here. Might be a little trivia, but anyway, there's 35 bombs altogether painted on his jacket. And there's the square C, that's his marking on the tail right there. But anyway, these are highly collected now. Some of the museums, yeah, you can show them if you'd like. John Slimp, is John Slimp here? Okay. John Slimp is he's in our organization here. He is finishing up a book, getting ready to be put out it's called Bomber Boys, and it's about bomber jackets. Now, as a summary, it was a miracle my dad survived. It's a miracle my sister and I are here. And here's some quick stats. Over 12,731 B-17s were built. 12,731. Over 4,735 were lost. That's a third were lost. 28,000 men were POWs. That's a tremendous amount of men. 26,000 were killed. And everything I've read, it's told me that there were more 8th Air Force flyers killed in action than all the Marines in the Pacific. That is true from everything I've read. Thousands were maimed for life, physically, mentally. So there were so many other things that PTSD, which we didn't know about back then. But my dad miraculously survived. And so it goes, we still live in a free country. My sister and I are here. And so my dad survived, and thank you so much for being here. This is Chuck's creation. Chuck, did you show the bombs going down? Are we all right are we all right time-wise for a few questions? I can't answer all. I was hoping Ray Fordyce would be here because he's the technical B-17 guy. And by the way, he's working on the Masters of the Air, or has been the consultant for Masters of the Air, which is like Band of Brothers in the Pacific. You all know about that, I would imagine, don't you? That the series is coming to TV, Masters of the Air. It'll be like the Band of Brothers in the Pacific. But Don, you got a question?
Well, it's more of a, I'm trying to speak up, it's more of a comment. Remember when you put up that pay info,
Right.
which is less than...
You thought he got paid too much?
Well, that's, I'm coming to that point. That, I know it doesn't seem like a lot, and it wasn't a lot. But I think that was about 3 times what his British counterparts got.
It was. You're exactly right. Exactly
that
right.
Was you went back into how to behave, towards the British, but the Americans were regarded as the ones with all the money.
Right,
and
right.
There was a lot of resentment on that basis because they were paid so much in comparison to the British.
Right.
And, when the single guys go into London, all the girls, they can get all the girls.
That's right. That's right. A couple of points there. I'll tell you real quick. My mother put together a wonderful scrapbook, and in the back of the scrapbook, there's all kinds of pictures of girls. I'm going, what in the world? They were my dad's girlfriends during the war. He wasn't married, of course, at that point, and didn't even meet my mother. But my mother was brave enough to put pictures of his girlfriends, and it was about 3 or 4 girls he dated. But as far as the pay you're talking about, and Hilbert over here, I talked to him at length about how did you get paid in England with American dollars, and if you wanted to go to the British pub. Now that's a whole nother. But I remember talking to Hilbert quite a bit about this, of how did you get paid, and but anyway, did that sort of answer? And we did get paid more, and the British were envious of the Americans, especially the Air Force, because their outfits look so good. And the other thing I wanted to tell you, can you imagine? Turn that around for a minute. In perfect shape, can you imagine walking down the streets of London and Cambridge wearing this jacket, or any jacket? But can you imagine what people would say to you? And my dad was not showy. He was not he didn't show or brag or anything. But I can't imagine what the women thought when they saw a jacket like this, or anybody.
Dad had a saying that the English said, "You're over here, overpaid."
Oversexed. But that's exactly right. But they were, and I mean, you can understand. But getting down back to the pay, they also got their food and all that kind of stuff paid for. So some of this money they probably sent back to the servicemen, or back home. Hilbert.
As a comment to follow up on the pay, I noticed he sent a little over 50% home to his parents of his paycheck. Plus he was worth every penny of what he got paid.
Right.
By comparison, when I became a PFC, I got an increase to $31 a month.
$31 a month.
$31
An increase.
was an increase from 29 to 31.
Wow. Hilbert, you educated me on how they got paid and what you did with that money, and you did script and different things. And so, anyway, thank you for that comment. Gould?
Yeah, for those that are interested, according to the CPI calculator, $300 in January of 1945 is equal to $5,002.38.
Wait a minute, say that again now?
According to the CPI,
CPI, okay.
that amount of money in 1945 is worth $5,000 today. Still underpaid, but that tells you about the relative value.
That's amazing. I hadn't done that research. Well, his $200 and some times 12 months is only it was about $3,600, because it was close to $300 is what he made. But of course, you got to remember, you're coming out of the Depression, and so that money was pretty good money. But you got to remember too, he's highly trained, and anyway, well deserved. Brent,
Yeah, Terry, do you know if he picked navigation or did navigation pick him?
a good question, very good question. He asked, did navigation pick him, or did my dad want to be a navigator? We talked about this last night. Almost everybody that I'm aware of that became a navigator or bombardier and all, they wanted to be pilots. They wanted to be pilots, but it was difficult. And my dad told me, and he wanted to be a pilot. He did tell me that, Brent. But he told me, he said that he couldn't do the balance for a pilot. There were all these balance tests, as you probably know about, that you have to take in order to make it to pilot. And he said he just wasn't able to fulfill those. So that's when he went to a navigator. But I will tell you that my dad, we went on many trips as kids. He always knew where he was going. He always. We're talking about, my dad never got lost. And that, now think about it, that's only when you had a state map or a city map. You didn't have GPS, but he never ever got lost. And it was just incredible when I think about back. And that's where my wife, Maria, sometimes, because I want to know where I'm going, and I want to know when I'm going to get there. And if I can't get there, I want to know why, or how I can go around. And so I'm a little bit like, I'm very much like that, because I want to know where I'm going, and I want to know when I'm going to get there. Chuck?
Yeah, I'm going to make a comment on coincidence. Doing this is neat, but looking at Terry's list of targets, and I went like, wait a minute. My son lives in Germany. He went to school there. He married a German national. He got a job over there, so he lives in Germany. And great in-laws, really like Hartmut Beata. And we visited them several times in their house in Merseburg. We know where Merseburg is. We've been there. It's a chemical. There are a lot of chemical factories around there. But just the fact that we're looking at, they bombed it, but here now my son's in-laws live in there.
Well, when I've been over in Europe, sometimes I've looked up and go, I know my dad flew right over us. We went to Berlin, and I know because he did bomb Berlin once. And anyway, but yeah, it's really amazing as you walk the streets. Before I get to him, my dad was in Amsterdam with another friend, two couples, and so the two men, my dad and his buddy, said, well, let's walk down the street. And I don't know, they were heading to something, the women were shopping. And his buddy says, I dated a girl here. This was 40 years after the war. Knocked on the door, and she came to the door. Anyway, that just, for some reason, that made me think about going over to Europe. That was in Amsterdam, and I forgot who, John Hasty or something. No, it wasn't Hasty. Anyway, but can you imagine after 40 years you knock on your girlfriend's door and she comes to the door? So, Luke, did you have a question?
Yes, I see that. I see that we're recording this. Are we going to make like through email, send us a link, or how will we get to the
Brent,
We have a YouTube channel out there. I think you have the link to, next time just send out a link. We have most of them that were recorded in the past.
So search YouTube?
We can send you the link. If you just send me an email, we'll send you the link.
yeah, that'd be great. It'd be great. Good question, because I needed to ask that too. Thank you.
Edna's got a question.
Okay, Edna and John, the last one, Edna. And Edna, if you didn't know, survived the Blitz in London in the war.
You talk about the start of the war in 1942.
That's right.
It was 1939 for me. And I do not remember my father until I was 9 years old.
Wow.
He was called up at the beginning of the war.
Right.
And he spent his time in India and Burma.
That's right. I remember about that. But I've seen her talk, and she's very, very interesting. John, did you have a...
Terry, just first off, great presentation.
Thank you, thank you.
Dad, I have a question. Did your dad never talked about the war? Did he ever go back to Snetterton Heath and visit with the 96th Bomb Group or do any reunions that you're aware of?
Good question. He really didn't, and I kind of encouraged him. He got the 8th Air Force magazine, and he gave to the museum and all that kind of stuff, but I don't remember him going to any reunions or anything. Just, I think one reason, John, because he bought a retail drugstore, and he was working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, and he only looked forward, I think. And to his credit, he built a fantastic business.
Yeah.
And another thing, this was one thing I wasn't even gonna. I'm gonna move you for just a minute, Scott. You can hang that up if you want. I think I wasn't really going to bring this up, but we already got a couple extra minutes. I wasn't going to. This won't take but a minute or two, but no, he just didn't go to the reunions at all. And I think once he got a certain age, he was probably too old to go. And I'm sad that he didn't, because I know the '96 had a lot of reunions, and I still see stuff from them and all, but I wish he had to some degree. But
I wanted to tell you that they have probably the most beautiful memorial to 96 Bomb Group at Centerton Heath, that rising B-17 made out of beautiful aluminum going up to the sky, and then they have that stained glass window that replicas at the museum.
That's right.
Beautiful stained glass airman window was a 96 Bomb Group.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I get invitations all the time to go over to the Snitterton Heath, where his base was, and it's a raceway now. I think it's a raceway, but they have a museum there honoring all the American flyers at the base. That's there. We can go, and it's a beautiful, beautiful museum. But also, if you go to the Mighty Eighth Museum, my dad's bomber group, the 96, when you go in the chapel behind the museum, we were just there. The stained glass window is to the 96. So as soon as you walk into the chapel behind the museum, the big stained glass window is to the 96. When I first saw that, I was just blown away. I was going, this is and it's got an airman, and I'm sorry, I wish I'd put a picture online. On here, I could have shown you. This is one of the last things I want to tell you if we've got one more minute. I could never understand why my dad didn't talk about World War II. I mean, I've thought about it for years and years and years, and all kinds of reasons. And of course, he had already passed. But I saw this movie, The Book Thief. Did anybody ever see this? The Book Thief. Did you ever see this? And anyway, the little girl at the end, and it's really about the little girl during wartime, and she's German, Austrian. She's living in Germany when all the bombs are falling from American and British bombers and all, and she talks about, in the book, how it's affected her family. But at the very end of the movie, bombs come down. I think they destroy her house. They kill her family. I think the dog may even be killed. I can't remember. But then it hit me. I said, this is why my dad didn't talk about the war. In my opinion, this is just strictly my opinion. It was war and dropping bombs or being in infantry. People got hurt. People got killed. And this is something you don't really maybe want to talk about. And then it hit me. I said, this is why, in my opinion, that he didn't want to talk about the war. So anyway, anybody else? Anything else? Thanks to everybody. Thanks for listening. Thank you for listening.